That's more than generous. But I don't intend to walk.
All right. What's bothering you then?
You're not going to like this, Orson. I want credit.
Come again?
It's the best thing I've ever written.
Mank is a biographical drama released by Netflix on December 4th, 2020. The film was written by Jack Fincher and was directed by David Fincher. The film stars Gary Oldman, Amanda Seyfried, Lily Collins, Arliss Howard, and Tom Pelphrey. Though many will be familiar with the movie Citizen Kane, even if it's only by name, most will be less able to put faces to the names of those who made it. This is especially true for screenwriter Herman Mankiewicz, who despite having a prolific career during the Hollywood Golden Age, faded into relative obscurity following the Orson Welles collaboration that etched these two men into the pages of Hollywood history. Mank is a movie made to shed light on the life experiences of the man who was a guiding hand in creating the narrative of what would become one of the most significant films in history. But does this dramatic retelling of Herman Mankiewicz's life hold up in its own right? Or does it rely on nostalgia from days left behind to carry it forward? In this review, we're flashing back to the glory days of the industry, and examining if the story they tell gives new meaning to the story we know. Just as a warning to everyone here, there will be major spoilers ahead. If you wish to see this movie for yourself without knowing anything beforehand, please click off the video now. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The story begins in 1940 as Herman Mankiewicz arrives at the North Verde Ranch in California, preparing for a sabbatical in which he will write a story for an upcoming movie. Having been sought out by former collaborator and young newcomer Orson Welles, Herman, better known as Mank, has been given 60 days to create a script. Though Mank is in bad shape due to a recent car accident and continually failing health due to alcoholism, he and his typist, Rita Alexander, begin creating the story of an aged newspaper tycoon whose grasp on his media empire has slowly slipped through his fingers with the passage of time and life. Mank bases this script on the life of real-life newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst, whom Mank met while working as a screenwriter for Paramount in 1930. He would also develop a close bond with Hearst's lover, Marion Davies, who was coming into her own as an actor at the same time. As Mank and Rita continue the writing of the story, Rita receives a letter from the Admiralty, informing her that the ship her husband was serving on was lost at sea, and that he is presumed dead. Rita storms out after Mank, not knowing what the letter was, makes snarky remarks about the stupidity of aircraft carrier tactics. After finding out the truth of the letter, Mank, embarrassed by his callousness, drinks himself into unconsciousness. As time goes on, fears begin to arise that Mank will be unable to finish the script in time. Mank continues on, sharing a moment with Rita when she deduces that one of the characters was based on Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM Studios that Mank came to loathe. Due to Mank's former connections in Hollywood, word begins to spread about his story and the implication that Hearst is the subject. Mank's brother Joe calls him, offering him a play-to-screen adaptation, hoping he will take it before he goes too far. Mank rejects the offer, reminiscing about days gone by and the memories he made becoming friends with Marion Davies when they walked the grounds of San Simeon. As the deadline for the completed story comes closer, and Mank slips further into the throes of alcoholism, Mank is forced to lie about the state of his progress to Orson. Rita, exasperated by Mank's deception and the complicity of his carer in helping him get drunk, threatens her resignation. After speaking with his carer and learning that Mank was solely responsible for physically and financially extraditing her and her people out of an unsafe Germany, Rita has a change of heart, deciding to continue on. Against all odds, Mank is able to finish on time, to the praise of his initially skeptical editor, Houseman. Houseman does, however, remind Mank that when he signed his contract with Mercury Theater, he gave up writer's credit. Houseman urges Mank to reconsider this arrangement, but Mank refuses, saying it all worked out. When Houseman asks Mank why he based his narrative on Hearst, Mank asks him if he had ever heard the parable of the organ grinder's monkey. Mank reflects on his life, flashing back to the buildup before the California election in 1934, where he witnesses MGM producing fake newsreels to sway the public vote towards the studio's preferred candidate, Frank Merriam. In the years that follow, we see Mank's friendship with Marion become strained after she leaves MGM for Warner Bros. We see Mank gamble his debt on the 1934 election result, and ultimately lose. We witness Mank's attempt to save the life of a depressed friend named Shelley, who takes his own life after being diagnosed with Parkinson's. Mank's reputation in the industry slowly fades, with his spiral culminating in a fateful night, where in a drunken stupor, he wanders into a party held by Hearst. He boisterously pitches the idea that would become his story, much to the ire of the party attendees he drunkenly defames. Everyone at the party turns on Mank, with Hearst personally escorting Mank off the property. As he does, he tells Mank the parable of the organ grinder's monkey, a tale of a monkey taken in from the wild who performs for people on the streets. The monkey becomes convinced that the organ player he is paired with needs him, and that every time he chooses to dance, the organ player will play, whether he likes it or not. Back in 1940, Mank experiences a roller coaster of emotion over several days, receiving visits from his former protege Charlie, his brother Joe, Marion Davies, and his wife Sarah, with all voicing their concerns for Mank's well-being and reputation. Mank's resolve is, however, reinforced when his brother tells him the story is the best thing he has ever written. Orson Welles calls Mank, commenting on how impressed and pleased he is with the work Mank has done, but he also comments on the problems trying to get the picture to theaters, courtesy of MGM's interference. Mank demands that Orson drive up immediately, and the two men meet to discuss terms. Orson informs Mank that the studio drama is starting to escalate, and should Mank want out of the project, RKO is prepared to relieve Mank of rewrite duties, while still honoring their original payment plus $10,000. Mank, however, counters with something utterly unexpected. He demands writer's credit, despite the terms of the contract he signed. Orson becomes furious, telling Mank that if he goes through with this, he may lose everything he worked towards. Mank points out that though he is an outcast, his reputation rests on his connections and choices. Orson is an outsider with a messiah complex that people are waiting to find reasons to hate. Orson flies into a rage, smashing Mank's liquor supply before storming out. An act which inspires Mank to write a new scene for the final act of the movie. In the final moments of the movie, Rita and Mank share a tender moment after she receives a letter that her husband was alive. Mank's story, which Orson turned into the movie Citizen Kane, would be awarded Best Original Screenplay in 1942. We see a final text crawl detailing the events following. We learn that 11 years after his win, at the age of 55, Mank would die from complications of alcoholism. You gotta admit, regardless of how much of this story is true and how much is fabricated, this movie is one that is very well made. Though very much a movie that technically and visually styles itself after the black and white classics of old, the content of the movie is easily understood, and at times is relatable to issues and dynamics we are familiar with today. It tells its story in a way that lets a modern-day audience feel a connection to Mank's life, and the state of the world during the 1930s. The instant standout of this movie has gotta be the acting. Though the movie does at certain points get a bit slow, the actors still inhabit the world effortlessly, and make the events we witness feel more real and impactful. Gary Oldman brings out Mank's sarcastic wit and exasperated attitude in a way that convinces you he actually was the man himself. Amanda Seyfried as Marion Davies is another instant standout, flaunting a witty charm and charisma that draws you in like a magnet. And when you put the two of them together, you really get a dialed-up taste of the classic movie magic that only two people write only for each other could have. The other performances are also incredible, with Arliss Howard's iteration of a brutish and hot-headed Louis Mayer, Charles Dance's depiction of the sly but suave William Randolph Hearst, and Tom Burke's portrayal of the charismatic, larger-than-life Orson Welles, being captivating characters in every moment of screen time they steal. All around, the casting was near perfect for the subject of the movie, making the world they create one that not only feels lived in, but relatably real. Dialogue draws you in not only with its aura of how period appropriate it feels, but also with how it reflects the state of that world and its inhabitants. It establishes a strong tone for not only how the winds of change slowly but surely reshaped the world in the 1930s, but also the extent some would go to ensure it did not see the light of day. Whether it is the San Simeon Mansion party revolving around the political climates of California and Europe, Mank's review of the fake newsreels, or the bedside discussions between Mank and his co-conspirators, the writing is both clever and effective in not only establishing various facets of what makes these characters who they are, but also how they fit into the world around them. This is best exemplified in the final discussion between Mank and Hearst, whereas Hearst escorts Mank out of San Simeon and out of his old life as a Hollywood screenwriter. He tells him the story of the organ grinder's monkey. This story not only shows just how major of a tipping point this was in Mank's life, but it also ends up being a slap in the face, as the implication of the monkey viewing themselves as the star of the show that no one can live without mirrors Mank's own position as a Hollywood grunt worker, thinking he is the master when he is really the slave. The editing of scenes in this movie is an element that is bound to go underappreciated considering how significantly it impacts the quality of Mank. The transitions really have the classic feel to them, and while not outstanding, they really do lend to the feeling that you're watching something straight out of the time period. While you can tell the cameras used to shoot this were very high quality given how much detail you can discern in close-ups, the conversion to black and white, the rescaling, and even the addition of imperfections like cigarette burns offer a very authentic look. The greatest aspect of the editing, though, is how the scenes are cut together in the third act. Though initial cutaways to flashbacks are pretty standard, happening at the placement of a line of dialogue or a look at somebody's face, the transitions become more crucial to story progression as time goes on. The more intense and significant scenes become, the more transitions between past and present we see, with the emotion ramping up with every passing second until everything merges together. The confrontations Mank has with Hearst and Welles intertwine seamlessly, showing not only how Mank came to be where he was, but also showing how his mindset has changed from his talk with Hearst, and how the lesson he learned there shapes his approach with Welles. It's hard to properly explain it unless you see it for yourself, but when you do, you understand that this sequence of scenes should be an instant career highlight for everyone who took part. The technical aspects of this movie come together in near perfect harmony with the literal moving parts on screen. The shots and angles give you everything you need for both scene and setting, with the set design and props displayed bringing that 1930s setting to life. Whether it be the chaos of moving full-size props and actors between the boxy buildings on movie sets, the smoky backrooms with card games and political chats, the flashy yet elegant-looking lights and signs of buildings and roadsides, and everyday implements like cars, radios, and letters, any audience will have no problem believing that they are watching something meant to represent the glitz and glamour that only that era could provide. The cherry on the stylish sundae, however, is the music. The orchestral beats are not only expert at replicating the feel of period soundtracks, but also capturing the atmosphere of a scene, making the slow brewing intensity of the final act even more rewarding. All told, if you put this in front of someone who didn't know any better, you just might be able to convince them the movie really was a product of the 30s itself. And it's pretty charming and memorable, if for no other reason than that. One glaring issue that will, however, be a problem for some is the pace. Much like its inspiration, Citizen Kane, this movie has a habit of jumping all over the place. Though every scene is crucial to developing the story of Mank's fall from grace and how he got to the point of writing Citizen Kane, it may take some intent examination in some scenes to figure that out. Scenes like Upton Sinclair's soapbox speech, the funeral of studio executive Irving Thalberg, and the subplot of Mank's friend Shelley taking his own life may seem like they're showing up for no reason if you're not paying attention to the small details and how the interactions play out. This isn't helped by the fact that a sizable amount of the movie is dedicated to flashback scenes, and the duration of said flashbacks is anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes long. Though the scenes are very well executed, the lack of consistency in where they show up and why can be a bit jarring. Not as jarring, mind you, as coming to the realization that Bill Nye the Science Guy cameos as a man running for senator. Can't wait to see how his bid for the presidency goes. The final rating for this hazy little love letter is 8.5 out of 10. Though a bit jumpy in its progression, it will still draw you in with its charismatic performances, its witty dialogue, a charming soundtrack, and eye-catching visual and technical work. Whether you care for the ins and outs of the real-life story that spawned this film, you can bet that this is a show that will earn your attention just fine on its own. That will be all for today. Thanks for stopping by. If at any point you experienced an episode of enjoyment or clarity, then consider sticking around. Like, subscribe, or share if you wish, and if you have any suggestions for things you want to see reviewed, be sure to drop them down in the comments. There's plenty more to come, so if you end up coming back for more, well, then I'll see you when I see you.